Vaishnavas who joined us from around the world.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
That's
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Vaishali from
Maharaj.
Muscat.
Dandavat pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
So, can we start?
Yes, so without much ado, Maharaj, over to you. We'll begin.
Thank you very much. Om Jnana Trivinandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshuzun Malitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Vyasya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we are continuing our discussion from the 16th chapter, text 1 to 3. And we touched on 2 or 3 points in the beginning of the purport. And the last one, which we concluded, was charity. So the next one down is called Dhamma. So these are different qualities Srila Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport of duties of the 4 varnas and 4 ashrams. So we talked about the sannyas and the sannyasis, how strictly they should observe the sannyas vows. And now it is the next 3 are mostly to do with householders. So we discussed charity last time. I hope you all remember that. And we'll continue now with the next paragraph of the purport. And the purport goes as follows by Srila Prabhupada. Then, as far as Dhamma or self-control is concerned, it is not only meant for other orders of religious society, but it is specially meant for householders. Although he has a wife, a householder should not use his senses for sex life unnecessarily. There are restrictions for the householders, even in sex life, which should only be engaged for the propagation of children. If he does not require children, he does not enjoy sex life with his wife. Modern society enjoys sex life with contraceptive methods and other abominable methods to avoid the responsibility of children. This is not in a transcendental quality, but is demoniac. If anyone, even if he is a householder, wants to make progress in spiritual life, he must control his sex life and should not beget a child without the purpose of serving Krishna. It is, if he is able to beget children who will be in Krishna consciousness, one can produce hundreds of children. But without this capacity, one should not indulge only for sense pleasure. So this aspect of self-control is of course not only meant for householders, all the 4 orders, whether you are a brahmachari, whether you are a grihastha, whether you are a vanaprastha, or whether you are a sannyasi. In order to make spiritual progress, one must have self-control. Of course, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita tells Arjuna, control your senses. And of course, these senses are the vices which bind us and entangles us more and more into the material world. And entanglement in the material world means we become bewildered, we become lost in the reality, and then we live in the world of illusion, thinking that is real. So for example, senses means we have 5 senses: the sight, the hearing, the smell, the taste, and the touch. And these 5 senses, so the sense organs, are what we use to understand the environment around us. But it cannot take you beyond the material environment. Therefore, the discipline of Krishna consciousness, the practice of bhakti yoga, is meant for purely spiritual upliftment. And therefore, in this particular purport, Prabhupada is saying that one should not abuse one's position for sense gratification. Of course, it's a very, very touchy subject, especially when we talk about sex life. Sex life is kind of a taboo subject because it is a very personal thing between a man and a woman. And of course, Srila Prabhupada also says that this whole world is revolving around sex life. And in order to facilitate sex life, you need money. And money is one of the most dangerous things to have. As soon as you acquire a lot of money, then you think on a material platform of thinking, I am now very rich, I can purchase anything I want with the money I have. So obviously, that will be a grand illusion because as we know, or as the saying goes, money can buy you everything but satisfaction. You can buy a beautiful bed with the latest slumber bedding and air pockets and this, that, and other, but you cannot go and purchase 5 minutes of peaceful sleep. Money can buy you all kinds of relishable food stuff. But after participating in indulging in eating all kind of palatable foodstuffs, temporary satisfaction is there, but the very next moment you will hanker for more because your taste buds are not fully satisfied by just eating once. You need to eat practically every day, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a day. So your taste buds, your sight, your hearing, your smell, your touch, all these can take us further and further into entanglement. So here in this paragraph of this verse, Srila Prabhupada is saying, Dhamma, self-control, is the most important requisite for spiritual discipline. So we all know that in spiritual discipline, that is why we call it discipline. We have to be very, very disciplined in the practice of spiritual practices of bhakti yoga, and therefore you will make spiritual progress. And as you make spiritual progress, remember, from the contaminated state to the pure state or transcendental state, the more and more as you progress in your spiritual advancement, you'll begin to relish the sweetness of spiritual life. So most of us, unfortunately, are still at the lower rung of the ladder of spiritual journey. We have probably put first foot or second foot on the first or second rung of our spiritual development. Even though we may be practicing for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, still we haven't come off the bottom rung because we are not testing the higher test. As Rupa Goswami says, Adosada tatha sadhu sangha tatha bhajana kriya tatha anatha nivriti. So when you do bhajana kriya, after associating with the devotees, sadhu sangha, then by the process of bhajana kriya, anartha nivriti takes place. Anartha nivriti, Prabhupada explains as purification of the heart. And as the purification of the heart takes place, then the next stage is you develop taste, ruchi. And when you develop taste for the spiritual practices, then you become nishta, become very firm in your resolute of following the spiritual discipline with self-control. Then of course, when you are fully self-control and really disciplined and you're established and firmly in the spiritual practices, then the next stage is, of course, you develop the taste, rasa. And when you develop that taste for spiritual life, then the next stage of developing prema and bhava are very easy. It is very easy to cross on to that level. But from the beginning stage of adosada, it is a little difficult because you have to have a lot of self-discipline, or as Prabhupada says, self-control. So we have to have self-control in our practice of spiritual values, our spiritual path, and as you become more and more stricter with yourself as individual, then you will see gradual advancement taking place. And how you see this gradual advancement in your own self is that you begin to lose taste for material things. There was one quote I was just reading 2-3 days back by Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said that one of the most important aspects of understanding that you are making spiritual progress is that you develop attraction and attachment for the lotus feet of Krishna and serving Krishna. And you become more and more distasteful with materialistic sense enjoyment. Now, when Prabhupada says you develop attachment to the lotus feet of Krishna, means that actually you develop taste for chanting the holy name. Because in this day and age, the only way we can perform bhakti is through chanting. Hare Nam, Hare Nam, Hare Nam, Eva Kevalam. Kalo Nasteva, 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 Gati Ranetha. So, where Vyasadeva had mentioned this 5,000 years ago, and he emphasizes 3 times, Hare Nam, Hare Nam, Hare Nam, Eva Kevalam, only way, no other way, no other way, no other way. So, Srila Prabhupada also has established this fact that as Kali Yuga progresses, we have to be reminded over and over and over of what we have to do, what is our real duty in life, especially those who are awakened to spiritual life. Of course, those who are lying in slumber, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur song says, Jeev Jago, Gora Chandra Bole. That why you are sleeping in the lap of witch called Maya. Awaken yourself, awaken yourself. Gora Chandra Bole. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to awaken you. So some of us, by the good fortune of causeless mercy of the pure devotee of Sri Krishna, Srila Prabhupada, and of course, many of his wonderful stalwart associates of Prabhupada who are very, very dynamically preaching this message to awaken the sleeping souls from the witch Maya, on the lap of the witch called Maya. And when we are recipient of this mercy, we are awakened to reality. And then we voluntarily come to take up this process of Krishna consciousness. And when we take up this process of Krishna consciousness, then of course, gradually, by good association, by following the principles of Dharma, by following, as Prabhupada says, self-control, then you will begin to taste the nectarian rasa of blissful taste. Of course, when we talk about tasting rasa or transcendental taste of higher understanding, it is very difficult to taste this because we are so used to taste things with our tongue and by our nose, the fragrance. And the combination of the fragrance and the tongue is what gives us a taste. But we can only taste material things, not spiritual. So the spiritual taste is called a blissful condition. As it says, Anandamoya Bhyasya, that you are always in a very blissful state of existence. Even in the most difficult situation, when the whole world around you is falling apart. For example, right now, we are going through this pandemic and coronavirus is kind of taking over everybody's life and disturbing the normal, so-called normal existence of our lives. The devotees are not disturbed by this. They take solace in chanting the holy name. And as I see more and more on internet, through Zoom and Facebook and many other social media, the lots and lots of devotees are coming on live and chanting the holy name, taking shelter of the holy name. Sometimes I see just a couple, husband and wife, sitting in their little living room with their smartphone on, live streaming, chanting the holy name. And whoever is connected with them, they may see this and they kind of connect with them and hear the holy name. But there are hundreds and hundreds of devotees, thousands of devotees all over the world are performing chanting the holy name, Sankirtan Yagya of holy name. So this is the real taste And when you have attraction for this, then you are getting that little glimpse, the transcendental taste of the holy name. And as you begin to get more and more, then your desire to increase your chanting increases. More and more chanting increases, then you become more and more blissful and completely oblivious to the external goings on. It doesn't really matter what happens around you. What happens in your heart, that matters. And what happens in your heart is that your heart becomes very pleasing, very peaceful, because it is connected with Krishna. So self-control is very important here. And as Prabhupada says, that the household life, the relation between husband and wife should be purely to assist each other to increase their service and remembrance of Krishna. So sometimes we kind of fail, and because we are, of course, very weak in our conviction, so that sometimes we are a victim to the desires of our senses. But even that is okay. You know, we are fallible. We are not infallible. The only person who is infallible is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. All living entities are fallible. Prabhupada said one time that even I can fall down. Obviously, it is unthinkable, totally unthinkable that Prabhupada would fall down. But as a great devotee of the Lord, in humility, he is saying, don't take anything for granted. We can all be victims of Maya and illusion. And therefore, we have to tread very carefully in our practice of Krishna consciousness. As we are treading very carefully, Krishna protects us. Just 2 days before, I was reading another quote from Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada said that if you sincerely, with sincerity and with dedication and determination, chant 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, then Krishna will protect you from falling down. Now, of course, when Srila Prabhupada says this, you could accept this as a 100% guarantee. Why? Because when a pure devotee makes a statement of such nature, Krishna has no chance or choice, but is obliged to his pure devotee. So when Prabhupada makes the statement like that, I feel so comfortable that I am trying my best, even though it may not be perfect, but at least there is sincerity in my chanting and determination is there. And that is what will protect me from the clutches of Maya, from the entanglement or allurement of Maya. And we will be safely protected in our little cocoon wrapped around the holy name of the Lord. So this is very important. And then we'll go into the next paragraph, which is part of these 3 verses. And Prabhupada says that the next paragraph, it starts, sacrifice is another item to be performed by householders because sacrifice requires a large amount of money. Those in other orders of life, namely brahmacharya, vanaprastha, sannyasi, have no money. They live by begging. So the performance of different types of sacrifice is meant for householders. They should perform Agnihotra sacrifice as enjoyed in the Vedic literatures. But such sacrifices at the present moment are very expensive, and it is not possible for any householder to perform them. The best sacrifice recommended in this age is called Sankirtan Yagya. This Sankirtan Yagya, the chanting of the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is the best and the most inexpensive sacrifice. Everyone can adopt it and derive benefit. So these 3 items, namely charity, self-control, and performance of sacrifices, are meant for the householder. So again, to emphasize these 3 very important aspects for a householder, giving in charity, as we discussed last time, that charity must be given purely for the service of Krishna. Of course, sometimes we become emotionally absorbed in some emotions and sentiments that we want to do some charity work like feeding the poor, clothing the poor. These kind of things are not meant for us. Prabhupada says charity should be done specifically for the propagation of Krishna consciousness. And therefore, if you go back to the verse where Prabhupada is describing charity, he's saying a householder should give 50% of his income to an institute who is propagating this message of the Supreme Lord, namely the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Of course, so I explained last time that this 50% doesn't mean that if you earn $1,000 a week, you give 500 to Krishna Consciousness Movement and you give 500 for yourself. No. What you do in practical terms is you take away all your overheads. After taking away all your overheads, whatever is left, you divide that. 50% you put in the bank or some safe deposit for rainy day. And the other 50% you use for propagating Krishna consciousness. Then, of course, as we just discussed previous paragraph, about Dhamma, self-control, sense control, controlling the senses is a very important aspect, not just for householders, but all the four orders of Krishna consciousness. And in the this final instruction for the householder is performing yagya. So as Prabhupada says, that all householders should perform Agnihotra. Now, if you go way back, about 100 years back, many of the householders used to perform small Agnihotras in their house for getting the blessings of the Supreme Lord. Either they want to start a new season for planting crops in their farm, or they want to perform some auspicious ceremony in the house, or buy a new item for the house, or if the new child is born in the house. Many different sanskaras would be accompanied by a small Agnihotra, by qualified brahmanas. But of course, nowadays, to find a qualified brahmanas is practically an impossibility. So Agnihotras are not practically recommended in this age. Of course, in the Shastra it says that the Agnihotras, the fire sacrifice, was supposed to be performed in Treta Yuga. And we know the example of Dasarat Maharaj. When Dasarat Maharaj wanted to beget a wonderful son who would continue his lineage of his dynasty, he performed the fire sacrifice. And out of the fire sacrifice, of course, the Yagya Purush came and he gave him a pot of sweet rice. And that sweet rice, then he gave it to his two wives. And the two wives then shared equal portion and gave it to the third wife. So all the wives of Dasarat Maharaj received a portion of that sweet rice as a blessing from the Yagya Purush or the Supreme Lord, Sri Vishnu. And they all beget children. So Kaushalya, she begot Ramachandra as her son. Kaikeyi got Bharat as her son. Sumitra, she got two portions. So she got two children, Lakshman and Shatruguna, as her sons. Anyway, the point is that that sacrifice was considered successful because for the purpose for which it was conducted, it was fulfilled, and the result was that Dasarat Maharaj was blessed with four beautiful sons, all in great personalities. Of course, now we understand from hindsight that these personalities were not ordinary. They were the Supreme Lord himself and his expansions. So that was a successful yagya. And there are many examples of successful yagyas performed in Treta Yuga. But in Kali Yuga, of course, fire sacrifice is not so much recommended due to one, the expenses which incur in it. Second, the paraphernalia used for fire sacrifice should be very pure, uncontaminated. But unfortunately, in this Kali Yuga, we cannot find pure ingredients. Everything has some form of contamination. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has introduced this beautiful yagya. And this beautiful yagya, the Sankirtan yagya, can be performed by anyone. Prabhupada says, even a poor man in the street, he can perform this yagya. Why? Because he is blessed by the two most important ingredients required to perform Harinam Sankirtan or Sankirtan yagya. What is that? The principle or the ability to hear and the ability to chant. And of course, thousands of years before, young Prahlad Maharaj introduced the 9 levels of bhakti, and the two first most principles were of the 9-fold devotional service was Shravanam and Kirtanam, hearing and chanting. And then of course, if your hearing is good, your chanting is good, then your remembrance is good. And of course, if you hear about Krishna, you chant about Krishna, and you remember Krishna. And then ultimately, this is what we are all supposed to be practicing, remembrance of Krishna. That is why Srila Prabhupada named this international society for Krishna consciousness, that our consciousness should be always absorbed in Krishna. And therefore, this Sankirtan yagya is so beautiful that all 4 ashrams and varnas can perform this Sankirtan yagya. And the beauty of this Sankirtan yagya is that it can be performed any place, anytime, anywhere. Now, what more do you want as a blessings from the Supreme Lord? Any place, anywhere, anytime, you can chant the holy name of the Lord. There's no restrictions. So, to perform the chanting of the holy name is very, very easy. We are all practicing this every day. But the point is that when we are practicing the Sankirtan Yagya, the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, we are advised by the 6 Goswamis, namely Rupa Goswami in his Nectar of Devotion. And he's of course citing not just Nectar of Devotion by his own experience and his knowledge, but he's citing Padma Purana, where these instructions are given by Vyasadeva thousands of years before, that there are certain rules and regulations which we must observe, namely the 10 offenses against the holy name of the Lord. This is a very, very important aspect of observing the 10 offenses against the holy name in order to achieve the desired result of chanting the holy name of the Lord. So we all are familiar with the 10 offenses, no need to go into the whole 10 offenses, but there is need to emphasize that we should be very familiar with these offenses. And the first offense, which I will go into right now a little bit, is to blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. Now, this is a very, very important aspect of being mindful, that we do not become critical of anyone and make offense against anyone. Only today, I shared my one very nice teachings which I got on my WhatsApp of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada is emphasizing this point, very point of being critical and making criticism. Criticism means offense against a Vaishnava. It's the most dangerous thing. So maybe some of you, I shared this with you, but since I'm discussing this with many other devotees whom I was unable to send, I will quickly recap that. The story is very simple, that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur sent some of his disciples to open a center in Bengal. When they went to this one particular place and they were ready, they set up the place. They invited Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada to come and do the installation ceremony of the deities. So he came there with great enthusiasm and was very pleased that his disciples have opened another center, which is going to be an outlet to attract more fallen entities to come and take shelter of Krishna and the holy name. And he inquired that where is this particular devotee? And the leaders of that the new temple which they have established told Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada that, oh, he did some nonsense, he was having some attraction towards some woman. So we we chastised him very heavily, and he left. And when Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur heard this, he said, "This is not a very good thing what you have done. Now I will not make this installation ceremony because you do not deserve this." He said, "If you at all want to atone for this, then go and find that person and bring him back." And all the devotees went here, there, everywhere, tried to look for this devotee. And finally they found him. He was working in some watch company or watch repair place. And when devotees approached him, he was so happy that his good fortune that he was blessed by the association of devotees. Even though these are the same devotees who criticized him heavily and make him leave the association of Sadhu Sangha, on his part, he was so happy to receive them. And he said, "I'm so unhappy in this, what I'm doing. I wanted to come back to the ashram, to the temple, but with what face could I come? Due to my weakness, I was fallen a prey to the Maya's illusionary energy." And the devotee said, "Don't worry. Gurudev has asked you to come back, and we have come to take you back." And with great enthusiasm in his heart of relief, he went with eagerness and he fell full prostrated to the lotus feet of Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur Prabhupada and asked for forgiveness. And Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur was so happy. He said that you have come back. Now continue following this process of bhakti. And the moral of this story is that we should not behave in any way to offend any Vaishnava. Due to our offense and our critical behavior, that we make him leave the shelter of the holy name and Krishna consciousness. And in that particular story, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur says, we spend hundreds and thousands of gallons of our blood to convince a living entity who is entangled in the illusion of Maya to come out and take shelter of Sri Hari. And then with a small criticism, we push him back into this entanglement. That is the worst offense we can come in. So as devotees, we should become very, very mindful that we do not criticize anyone. And that is why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his 6 Sasikam prayers, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, not just being a supreme personality of Godhead, but in his avatar as Nimai, was known as Nimai Pandit. As young Nimai, who was a Pandit was a very learned person. So he was learned in all the scriptures, all the Vedas, and he could defeat anyone when there is a debate about any spiritual talk or discussions. But he did not leave any books for us or writings for us. He just left the 8 Siksastikam prayers. And one of them which we recite regularly, Trinadapi Sunichana, Tarorapi Susana, Amanina Maninena Kirtanya Sadahari, Amanina Manidena. Mahaprabhu is teaching us one should not have any desire for self-respect, but one should be always ready to offer respect unto all others. So all the devotees who are serving Krishna, in whatever capacity they are, we are in no position to make judgment about their position. Whether they are advanced, whether they are Kanishta, whether they are Madhyam, they are Uttama. No. Our business is Amanina Manidena, give respect and honor to them. And as we follow this process of honoring and respecting devotees, naturally the Supreme Lord becomes very happy with us and he showers his blessings upon us. And by his blessings, then we begin to make advancement in Krishna consciousness. And coming back to the earlier point which I said, that as we are making advancement, we begin to relish the transcendental bliss of Krishna consciousness. And when we begin to taste this, then we want more and more and more. And as we want more, then of course, we all know if you want more and more of this transcendental bliss, then you go to work for it. And what is that? You become more and more serious in dedicating your life for practicing Krishna consciousness. So here, these are the 3 main principles which are discussed in these previous 3 paragraphs about the duty of a householder. So we should be very, very careful to implement this in our life. And I would not just go as far as saying that this is for householder, as Srila Prabhupada says in the last line of this purport. So these three items, namely charity, self-control, and performance of sacrifice, are meant for householders. But I would go a little further and say it is for every one of us. Whether you are a brahmachari, whether you are a householder, whether you are vanaprastha, or whether you are sannyasi. All of these are applicable to us according to our own position and according to our own situation. So we can all perform charity. Even a brahmachari can become charitable to other brahmacharis living in the ashram. Brahmachari, of course, has to be also self-controlled and perform sacrifice. There's no question to discuss this, because the very basic fundamental principle of Sankirtan Yagya is for all of us, whether you are a Brahman, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, or Sannyasi. We are all supposed to have basic fundamental principle of Krishna Bhakti is to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So we should take this to heart and follow this. And if you follow this sincerely, then we will definitely make progress in our endeavors of Krishna consciousness and be protected from the allurement of Maya or the offerings of illusionary energy can come. I will offer you something better, because lower taste is very easy to acquire. Higher taste is a little difficult. But once you acquire higher taste, then the lower taste has no meaning to you. So the next one is Prabhupada is discussing about the brahmacharis now. So then, Swadhyaya, Vedic study, is meant for brahmacharya or student life. Brahmacharis should have no connection with women. They should live a life of celibacy and engage the mind in the study of Vedic literatures for the cultivation of spiritual knowledge. This is called Swadhyaya. So, basic principle of a brahmacharya is to dedicate in the study of the scriptures. Now, of course, if we had the good fortune to be following Varnashram from the very beginning of our life, that our parents are very much dedicated to Krishna consciousness, and they are following the Varnashram rules, regulations, and then through Garbhadhan Sanskara, we are born into their families, and through good Sanskara, we are also given this opportunity to follow the standard practice of student life under the direction of the spiritual master. Then later on, when you come of age, you get married and continue with your household life, and at appropriate time, when you finish with your household social duties and dedication, then you enter Vanaprastha, and eventually towards the fag end of your life, whatever little time is left, you dedicate fully in a renounced spirit, not necessarily take sannyas, but in a renounced spirit. That is more important, that you give full importance and dedication for focusing in remembering Krishna towards the end of life, where we know death is for certain, and we can fully absorb our minds, our hearts into the practice of remembering Krishna. And eventually, of course, when that death comes, you can remember Krishna and go back to spiritual world. Now here, as Srila Prabhupada says, the brahmachari should dedicate himself for studying Vedic literature. So all of us, at different stage of our lives, we came to Krishna consciousness. Awakening of our heart took place by the mercy of Guru and Gauranga. So we didn't have the advantage of going through brahmacharya life or being under a student life or in the care of an able spiritual master who teaches properly the principles of bhakti. So I as a preacher of Krishna consciousness, say that all of us, regardless of which varna we belong to, which ashram we belong to, we must all practice the study of scriptures. And our good fortune is by the mercy of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Swami Prabhupada, who took great pains at the age of 70 to translate all these wonderful books into the language which we can understand. Of course, Srila Prabhupada translated all the books, the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavad Gita, Ishopanishad, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, and many, many other, I think in all 70 to 80 different books, Srila Prabhupada had translated into English. And then he commissioned all his different disciples from different parts of the world that you take up this challenge now to translate into your language so that every person in this world can have access to these transcendental scriptures and study them. So we are very fortunate that at least for those of us who understand English, we have the first-hand translation of Srila Prabhupada in terms of Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and all the other literatures, which we can study every day and dedicate little time to these scriptures and be enlightened more and more as we study to become more focused in the instructions and the time-bound knowledge of Vedic culture, which is entwined in these books to enlighten us and free us from illusion. And therefore, we become more and more richer in our experience of knowledge. And as you become more and more knowledge in these transcendental literatures, then definitely we will become more focused in our spiritual practices. And as we are becoming more focused, then, as I said, we become more serious in our practice of Krishna consciousness. And as we become more serious, then we become more enlivened. And of course, enlightened at the same time. And as you become more and more enlightened and enlivened and become more and more realized in this transcendental knowledge, then you transcend from the lower level into the higher level. And the highest level is, of course, as Krishna explains to Arjuna, oh, my dear Arjuna, transcend the effects of the three modes of material nature. As long as you are in this material world, you will be influenced by mode of ignorance, by mode of passion, and by mode of goodness. Therefore, Arjuna, transcend even the mode of goodness and come to Visuddha Sattva, pure mode of goodness. And when you are transcended the three modes of material nature, then these three modes of material nature, even though you are in the material world, cannot influence you at all, because now you are under the shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. And when you are in Sri Krishna's shelter, then material energy cannot touch you. You become your original constitutional position of the living entity, which is the spirit soul, pure, as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So I gave this example a couple of days ago. I was giving class here to the devotees in Bali. We're discussing this from the 7th chapter, and some of it is quite technical and analytical. But those who understand can understand, and those who cannot, still persevere, make endeavor, and Krishna will reveal this to you by Krishna's mercy. So the point I made that time was that the spirit soul, as we all understand, is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, it is one in spirit with the Supreme Lord in terms of quality. Sat, Chit, Ananda, Vigraha. So we are eternal. We have the potency to have full knowledge. We have the potency to have full Ananda. And of course, last but not least, we have a Vigraha. We have a form. We are not just some energy. We have a form. And the soul, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita, is the marginal potency of the Lord. And because we come in the marginal category as a very infinitesimal little spark, we can very easily be influenced by the external energy source, whichever is more prominent. So just like now I just said, that in the material world we'll be very much influenced by the three modes of material nature, Tamagun, Rajagun, and Sattvagun. And the very nature of the soul, it depends on which side is leaning. It will be influenced by that. So if the soul is leaning towards the material shelter or the material environment, then you'll act on a material platform. And acting on a material platform means, I am this body. I am this. Everything belongs to me. I and mine. And we get entangled with I and mine. But as we become awakened to this knowledge and realize souls from the scriptures, from Prabhupada, that I am spirit soul, I am not this body. So therefore we now practice bhakti to come out of that platform of a bodily concept and go into a spiritual concept. Now the spirit soul, if it's leaning towards spiritual environment, then it begins to act spiritually. Now, Prabhupada said very nicely that all our ISKCON temples are spiritual environment, because the predominant residence in that property or the grounds which belongs to the Lord is the Supreme Lord himself. And wherever the Supreme Lord is, there is light and there is no nescience, there is no darkness. And spirituality emanates from the Supreme Lord and pervades all over Krishna's property. So as long as you are within the shelter of Krishna's property in the temple, then you are in a spiritual environment. And because you are in a spiritual environment, you begin to act spiritually. Because in the temple, every activity you perform is spiritual, even though it may appear material. So I give this one example. You cook very nice preparations, beautiful preparations, all colorful and fragrance and taste, and some dry, some liquidy, some all different kinds of palatable dishes, you can say, and offer it to Krishna. And you make one plate which is not offered to Krishna, identical plate. And after the bhoga which has been offered to Krishna, you put that plate side by side with the bhoga plate. With our material vision, it appears the same. There's no difference. But definitely, there is a transformation has taken place. When you offer the bhoga to Krishna, Yome Bhakta Prayachate. That's the underlying principle. Yome Bhakta Prayachate. With love and devotion, Krishna says, I will accept it. And when Krishna accepts this, he transforms all that bhoga from material element to spiritual element. But still, with our material eyes, we cannot see that as spiritual. We just see that it is same as the accompanying plate, identical with the bhoga, which is not offered to Krishna. But there is a difference, is that when you partake the prasadam, it brings a change of consciousness, it brings a change of heart, purification takes place. But on the other hand, if you eat bhoga, which is also looking identical to the prasadam plate, the effect is that you become more entangled in illusionary world. As Krishna says, if you eat food that is not offered to me in yajna, you are readily eating sin. And therefore, if you eat bhoga, which looks exactly like prasadam, but it is bhoga, then definitely you are incurring entanglement into sinful activity and sinful world. And you'll be impacted by the sin that is incurred by eating food stuff which is not offered to the Supreme Lord. Similarly, every activity, Srila Prabhupada says, in the temple, every activity, even sweeping the grounds, washing the pots in the kitchen, preparing the food stuff, offering the food stuff, offering the deities bathing, offering clothing to the deity, offering jewelry to the deity, offering artik to the deity, singing for the deity. All this is spiritual. And because you are in the spiritual environment, then the soul begins to feel happy because it is in its natural constitutional environment of spirituality. It will act spiritual. As I said, if you're out of the spiritual environment, it will act like material. So I give this example that a normal light, whether it is a light bulb or a candle, it has got a very nice sort of whitish glow. And if you take that light into a dark room, the whole room will be filled with light. Now, that light source, whether it is a light bulb or a candle light, can change simply by condition. So if you put a red color glass, a tinted glass with redness in it, and immediately the whole room, instead of very bright and white, it will become reddish. It will have a reddish hue. Change from red to blue, then the hue will become blue. Now change from blue to green, it will become green. In other words, whatever color of glass you put in front of the light source, that hue will take place, that coloration will take place. but still the source is still pure. It's still white. It hasn't become red, blue, green. It is still white. So the soul is pure because it is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. But as I said, it becomes more and more covered by different coverings of material offerings like red, blue, green, white. Then you will take up that nature. So if you are under the domain of materialistic energy, then obviously you will become material because you will act materially. Although you are not material, you will act material. So therefore, the beauty of this process of Krishna consciousness is such that when we follow the process of Krishna consciousness, it will take us out of this material realm and bring us to spiritual realm. So, as I said, the temples where Srila Prabhupada is established, where beautiful deity worship is going on of Radha and Krishna, Sri Sri Gaurnitai, Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, then their place becomes transcendental and pure and spiritual environment. Now, the beauty of this process is such that by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, he said every household, just like we were discussing before the duty of a household, every household can become a temple of Krishna. All you have to do is invite the Lord in your home and say, and just with humble prayer, tell the Lord, dear Lord, this our humble home is an offering to you. This is your home. Please make this home your residence. And when the Lord happily takes up your offer and becomes the resident of your home, now your home is no more a home made of brick and mortar, or it is no more homely with homely comforts, but it is now spiritual home. It is Krishna's home. And therefore you are now beneficiary of living in Krishna's home in a spiritual environment. So therefore all your activities in your home, whatever performance you do, cooking for the family, offering to Krishna, cleaning the house for the pleasure of Krishna, everything you do in the house is for pleasure of Krishna. And therefore you are in a spiritual environment and you'll act spiritually. And as you act more and more spiritually, then that spiritual power becomes stronger and stronger. It will be so powerful that it will overwhelm your material body and you'll become spiritual. And all your thoughts, all your activities, all your actions will be spiritual in nature. And because everything becomes spiritual in nature, that will be very pleasing to the Supreme Lord. Because at the end of the day, whatever we do spiritually, it is for the pleasure of Krishna. And when we follow this, then of course we become perfectly situated. So it is, according to my clock here is 9 o'clock. So we continue with the next paragraph or take time for question and answer. Haribo, Rasakrita Prabhu.
Yes, Maharaj. I'm just unmuting myself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. So I was just thinking that it's 9 o'clock. Shall we leave some time for question and answer or continue into the next paragraph or leave that for next time?
No, we'll leave that for next time. We've already got some questions, Maharaj. So there are 3 questions in the queue. And so I'm going to begin. Question number 1 comes from Deenadayal Prabhu. Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam. My question is, among the 4 ashrams, only in Grihastha order one can earn money or do business. Is it so, Maharaj?
In a simple and short answer, yes. Because brahmacharis are not supposed to do business. Their service is to serve the spiritual master and go and beg alms. Of course, nowadays we don't beg alms, but we go for Sankirtan, book distribution, and raise funds for the spiritual master and his ashram. At the Vanaprastha, also you are living in either the ashram, because mostly nowadays you don't go to the forest. So you take shelter of the ashram, where the ashram will create an environment for you to serve Krishna. And sannyasi, of course, sannyasi's business is what? Not business. Prabhupada never encouraged. Prabhupada himself, as a topmost role model of a sannyasi, never did business. And he never encouraged his disciples who were sannyasis to do business. He says, sannyas is only for one purpose and only one purpose, is to go out and preach all over the world. So as far as my understanding is concerned, that in our ashram as a sannyasi, our only business is to preach and not worry about who is going to take care of us socially. Krishna will take care of that. And we are all living proof in this movement. There are many, many wonderful sannyasis in our movement who are dedicated preachers. They go and preach, but they are taken care of. Their needs are taken care of. So as far as my short answer to this question is, only grihasthas are permissible to do business for livelihood. And the other three, the brahmacharis, the vanaprasthas, and the sannyasis are simply there to dedicate their life for preaching, cultivating Krishna consciousness, brahmachari for studying, vanaprastha for becoming more and more serious in their dedication to Krishna and Guru. The sannyasi have to do everything for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna. And on top of that, their only business is to preach and preach and preach. As Prabhupada says, preaching is the essence.
Thank you, Maharaj. Next question is from Anupama Radharani Devidasi. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my respectful obeisances. As parts of the Lord, we have a Swaroop. Our scriptures tell us that the Jivatma is 1/10,000th part of the tip of the hair. How do we understand this contradiction?
Well, there is no contradiction. See, Srila Prabhupada mentions citation from the scriptures. He's saying the size of the spirit soul is 1/10,000th of a tip of a hair. Now, if you look at the actual understanding, Srila Prabhupada explains that every living entity is a spirit soul. So if you take a small bacteria, it's a very tiny microscopic thing. And that bacteria has got a body. And if you are a student of biology, you will know that it is cytoplasm and nucleus and cellular cell and the body which the bacteria lives in. And within that, there is a soul. So how small the soul is, because the bacteria is also almost like a 10,000 tip of a hair. You need like a 1,000 time microscope to expand that, to see the little bacteria. So there is no contradiction in that. There is very simple, is that the soul is very, very small. Now, of course, this is the citation given in the scriptures. There's 1/10,000th for tip of a hair. Now, you can be a little analytical here, and you can take a hair. You can take my little hair and then see it in the cross section in 1/10,000th of that. And then you go on a tail of an elephant. His hair is very thick, almost like 3-4 millimeter thickness. So if you take 1/10,000th of that hair, then there is a discrepancy of the size. But I would say we just accept normal hair, and that is the size of the soul. Now the Swarupa, Srila Prabhupada says, is that according to the consciousness at the time of your departing the body, especially this is meant for humans, because when you are in a human body, you have the form of the body, which is, Prabhupada explains, just like that I have this body, and when I put on a shirt and a trouser, then the shirt and this trouser take the shape of my body. So similarly, when the soul enters, soul gets opportunity for a human body, the human body is developed according to the form of the body, or the form of the soul, the Swarupa. Because Prabhupada says that we all have same Swarupa just in the spiritual world, 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth, 2 ears, and then 2 hands, 2 legs, just like this body. But it's not made of Panchbhuta. It is made of spiritual energy, pure. It doesn't get old, doesn't get disease. Just like Krishna's body is spiritual. Now, according to your body in a human form of life, you get opportunity to either go higher up in the level of consciousness, or you go lower down the consciousness. So if you go higher, then you get demigod bodies and more superior bodies, still same as a humanoid, but the consciousness is much purer. And because the consciousness is much purer, your activities are much purer. And as you go into lower scale, As we have experienced in our also human bodies, there are some people who are so much influenced by a mode of ignorance that they are living in like basically like animals, very dirty, very unclean, and they have no, I mean, they don't have any human values, you can say. They live like an animal. But then, as Prabhupada explains from the sloka in Bhagavad Gita, yam yam vapiswaram bhavam ante kalevaram, that at the time of death, whatever your consciousness is, the soul is transmigrated to that level. So if your consciousness is going down the scale and you come to an animal body, and depending on which animal species you're going to go into, then you are given that animal body. But your real Swarupa is like a humanoid, which you already have a body. So I don't see there is any contradiction. Only thing is that we try to understand this thing with our relative understanding, to see things in relative terms. So you're trying to measure things. But if you look at the size of the soul, it's very small, 1/10,000th of the tip of a hair. Now, on the other hand, the size of our planet Earth is given something like, I don't know how many miles circumference, how big from north to south, east to west. This is a size which you can get from the scientific knowledge. But the point is that if you take this planet Earth in relation to the cosmos, the whole cosmos, and forget the other universes, there's just this particular universe of the four-headed Brahma, how small we are. Prabhupada said that in this particular universe, if you take one big sack full of mustard seed and take that one mustard seed and put on your palm, that is how big the Earth is in comparison to other planets. So if you look at this, it is just relative size. Size doesn't matter, because the same soul can have a bigger body, like an elephant. So there is an elephant's body which is huge, and there's a microbe which is very small. And there are intermediate in between, different sizes of bodies. But the soul nonetheless is the same. Is 1/10,000th of tip of a hair, and it is part and parcel of Krishna. And that is very simple. I don't see any contradiction, unless, of course, the person asking question, I think Anupama Mataji from Dubai, has a different concept. Maybe she can enlighten us.
Anupama Mataji, would you like to unmute yourself? Is it okay with the answer that Maharaj gave?
Yes, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my
Hare Krishna.
yes, Maharaj. So as I understand your answer, it means that it is just relative. Our size is relative. We all have a Swarup, but there is no contradiction in the sense that the size is relative.
Yes, because all the souls, every single soul, which is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is same in size, 1/10,000th of tip of a hair. But according to in the material world, whatever the body you get the different external covering. But in the spiritual world, of course, you have your natural Swarupa, and whatever that Swarupa is, Krishna will reveal it at appropriate time. And still, the soul itself is irrelevant, because you are the body there. In the spiritual world, you are the body. It's not that you have a body. In the material world, you have a body. That is the difference.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
So Anupama Mataji has another question, but we will go to that. Before that, we have one question, Maharaj. We have 2 or 3 more. So we have one question from here, from Radha Krishna Rasarnavadas Prabhu. And his question is, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Thanks for enlightening us on the holy names. His question is, how anyone can perform atonement against 10 offenses to the holy names?
Well, in the first place, I think we should try to avoid this. But in case we are a victim of making an offense against any one of those 10 offense, then one is seriously praying to Nam Prabhu. Srila Prabhupada explains that if you pray to the holy name and ask for forgiveness, that in your immaturity, in your overwhelming influence by external energy of Maya, that you became overwhelmed and maybe commit some offense, then you pray to the holy name, and holy name will definitely take that sincere prayer into consideration and forgive you. Because as Prabhupada says, the holy name is the most merciful in Kali Yuga to deliver the fallen souls. So the holy name, of course, is not different from Krishna. Krishna understands the nature of the this fallen condition of this Kali Yuga existence. So obviously we will make mistakes, but if you are genuine mistakes and if you genuinely atone for it, then the holy name will forgive you for sure. But on the other hand, Srila Prabhupada says that if you are a serial offender and keep praying to the holy name, then the holy name will not be merciful to you. Just like Prabhupada says, he gives the example of a Christian that on a Monday to Friday, or rather Monday to Saturday, they perform all kinds of sinful activities. Then on a Sunday morning, they go to the church, and then after the morning sermon is finished, the priest would go into the confession box, and the other side, the person who has committed sin would go and sit, say, Father, forgive me, for I have sinned. And then they'll reveal what sin you have done. And then the father on the other side will not know who you are because there's a curtain. All he knows is either man or woman, according by the voice. But he says, my child, the Lord has forgiven you. And they have chant so many names of the holy name on the rosary, or give certain donation, and you are forgiven. And then you go very happily saying, light-hearted, oh, I am forgiven. The Father is a representative of the God, Supreme Lord, he is forgiven. And then Monday you start doing the same nonsense again. And then following Sunday you go and say, Father, forgive me for I have sinned. Prabhupada said, this kind of sinful activities and forgiveness and atonement is inexcusable. But sincerely, if you make a mistake and you beg the holy name, then for sure the holy name will forgive you. Because the holy name is the most merciful and is most concerned for our well-being rather than we are concerned for their well-being. So therefore, it is very important that we follow this process which is given to us and try to avoid all offenses as possible, as much as possible. Then our lives will become simple and happier one. And there is no question that we will be knowingly committing offense. See, there's two things. If you knowingly commit offense, then that is a dangerous situation. Then there is, I think, less chance of forgiveness. But in our unknowing state or accidentally we do commit something of an offense, then Krishna will definitely forgive us with our sincere prayer for forgiveness.
Thank you, Maharaj. So there's we have 3 more questions, another one from Anupama Mataji. So I'm going, by the queue. So she's asking again, the question is, Maharaj, can you explain why Agnihotra Yagyas are done? What is the objective? Is it done to please Lord Vishnu?
Ultimately, all yagyas are performed for the pleasure of Krishna or Vishnu. And Agnihotra basically means that when we invoke the fire, the Supreme Lord as Agni Purusha, or the Supreme Lord Vishnu or Krishna comes in the form of fire and accepts your offering. And the ahuti or the homa which we put into the fire, like the grains, clarified butter, and other ingredients of the yagya, are accepted by the Lord as your offering. And depends on what the purpose of yagya is. The purpose of that yagya is then fulfilled by the satisfaction of Vishnu. But as I said earlier on, that in this day and age, it is very difficult to perform these Agnihotras because it's very difficult to find the Brahmanas who are qualified to perform these Agnihotras. Therefore, in the Prabhupada is explaining that for this yuga, best to perform Sankirtan Yagya. And Sankirtan Yagya is so beautiful, as I said, any place, anytime, anywhere, simply chanting the holy name. And that is the only basic requirement, and no ingredients are requirement. Simply your heart and the power of speech and power of hearing, we dedicate that for offering to Krishna. And because you offer your mind and body and speech and everything you have to Krishna, then it becomes transcendental because it is now offered to Krishna. So as far as I am concerned, Agnihotras are not practical, although we perform many times these small yagyas in our homes and in the temples. But as far as I see, by the declaration of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Lord himself, he introduced Harinam Sankirtan, the Sankirtan Yagya. And that is the topmost yagya which anyone can perform. You don't have to be a Brahmana. You have to be a devotee. You have to be willing to chant the holy name. And as Krishna, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, if anyone who chants Hare Krishna is a devotee or she is a devotee, simply by chanting the holy name. So we become devotees, become qualified to become devotees if we chant the holy name, and then we perform the yagya, and that yagya is accepted by the Supreme Lord, and benefits of the yagya will automatically be fruitful to us. But of course, obviously, we should not perform this Sankirtan Yagya for some material benefit. Prabhupada explains that if you simply perform for the pleasure of Krishna, and I have said this a few times in a few classes I have given, our only business is to chant the holy name with the mood and consciousness. Is my chanting pleasing Krishna? My only business, I want to please Krishna. So every moment when you're thinking, when you're doing your japa or kirtan, you should think, I want this kirtan, I want this japa to be pleasing to the Supreme Lord. And please, dear Lord, be pleased with my offering. This is my humble offering. Then when you do that offering, Krishna becomes pleased and everything else becomes perfect. But if you do this yagya, as is mentioned in I think the 7th offense of the holy name, if you consider chanting of the Hare Krishna to be similar to karma kanda offering, then I think it's 8 probably. If you think the chanting will give you the same result as karma kanda action of fruitive activity, then it is an offense. So therefore, we should avoid all desires except desire to become perfectly surrendered to the lotus feet of Krishna, and think on the safe side that I am chanting for the pleasure of Krishna only. And that way, you are on a very safe grounds where there is no offense.
Thank you, Maharaj. We have now next question from Muralidhar Prabhu, from his wife Anasuya Mataji. Hare Krishna, Danvat Pranam Guru Maharaj. When we do Vaishnava Prad unknowingly, how to resolve it?
There is 2 ways of doing this. If you commit an offense against a Vaishnava unknowingly, and later you realize that you have offended that particular Vaishnava, then simply go to that Vaishnava with folded hands in humility and say, Prabhu, please forgive me. I was thinking like this, but I don't really mean that. Kindly be merciful and forgive me for this offense. That is one. Second, if you do not know whom you have offended, but maybe your action might have offended unknowingly someone, then you, with folded hands, you pray to Nam Prabhu, say that I don't know if anybody is offended by this action or activity of mine. Please kindly forgive me. It wasn't intended for that purpose. So I am sincerely asking for forgiveness. And Nam Prabhu will forgive you, and the person who may have been offended without knowing will also be merciful, because at the end of the day, a Vaishnava is always considering the well-being of others. So he will never take an offense. Just like we know from the story of Amrish Maharaj, that Durvasa Maharaj, Durvasa Muni, when he approached Amrish Maharaj and said, please forgive me, I took it as an offense when you took a sip of water to break your Ekadasi fast. But it was not an offense, but I was seeing it as an offense. So Sudarshan Chakra is after me. Kindly forgive me for this offense. And Amrish Maharaj fell at the feet of Durvasa Muni and said, no, you have not offended me. On the contrary, I think I offended you. I should have taken permission from you before taking even a drop of water. So a Vaishnava is always compassionate, and therefore a true Vaishnava will never take offense, but he'll be forgiving and pray to Krishna, please Krishna, forgive this person, for he may have committed this, but I personally don't accept this as an offense. You please forgive him and free him from any aparad or reaction for their offense. And that is a real cultivation of Vaishnava culture. And if you develop that and everybody develops that, then we are living in a very wonderful environment of Vaishnava culture, where nobody is offending everybody, but everybody is feeling of pleasing everyone, and we are a happy family.
Thank you, Maharaj. That was so very nice. Anasuya Mataji, you wanted to say something?
No, Prabhuji. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Thank you.
It is clear.
Hare Krishna.
So the next question is from Balaram Prabhu. His question is, how to remember Krishna always, mainly while performing constitutional duties and also in all circumstances?
Well, my simple answer to this question is that we have to see everything in relation to Krishna. Whatever we do, we should think, this is for the pleasure of Krishna. Even if you're doing some, as you mentioned, your constitutional duties, suppose going to the office. So I've said this in the past, that even going to the office is very mundane thing, nothing to do with Krishna. But if you think in connection with Krishna, that my going to the office is going to allow me to earn some livelihood, I will get a salary from my working in the office. And this money which I get from the work I'm doing, however though it's mundane, but it is an offering to Krishna, then the money I earn from that, I will take home and I will use that for the pleasure of the Vaishnavas and serve them. So you serve your wife, your children as Vaishnavas. So in one sense, your earning is for Vaishnav Seva. At the same time, you have Krishna in your home. Either you have Radha Krishna, Gonitai, or Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. You are serving them also. So it is for their pleasure. So all in all, even going to the office seems mundane, but your change of consciousness is most important. The consciousness which you think is most important, because this is all about consciousness. See, even if you are in Vrindavan, but you are thinking about your home, then even though you are in the holy dham, you're thinking about your home. Therefore, your consciousness is your home consciousness or your home country. Then you are not going to get the benefit of the holy dham. So similarly, it's the consciousness. But at the same time, even if you are in your hometown or home country, you think about Vrindavan, then you are in Vrindavan consciousness. Just like Prabhupada says, I go wherever in this world, Vrindavan is in my heart. And therefore, Prabhupada is in Vrindavan consciousness. He never leaves Vrindavan because his consciousness is Vrindavan. He thinks Vrindavan. He lives Vrindavan. So similarly, in our day-to-day life, we think Krishna. Everything is for Krishna. Going to market and buy bhoga is thinking, I'm buying this bhoga so that I can make a very nice offering for Krishna. So even the mundane activity of going to marketing for buying bhoga is become transcendental, because it is going to make very nice offering for Krishna. If you go to buy some clothing for yourself, you think, I am going to marketplace to buy this clothing so that I can be presentable to Krishna with dignity and decency. So, obviously it is not appropriate to go in front of Krishna, naked. So you have to cover yourself with decency. So just thinking that this decency I'm applying on my body is for the pleasure, so I can approach Krishna. So everything you must think Krishna, how I can connect with Krishna. And if you connect everything with Krishna, then it is very easy to think Krishna. The other example I gave the other day also when I was there in Oman, in Muscat, that we drink water every day. So you take a glass of water every day, but do you think that this beautiful water is Krishna? Because Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am the taste of the water. So if you start relating everything with it, then every time you take a sip of water and say, wow, this is beautiful, this is Krishna. So you automatically think Krishna, although it is quenching your thirst and satisfying your thirst, but you think Krishna. Just like I gave the example the other day, that if you think about Ford, immediately Ford means car. You think about a car. You don't think about Ford, the great grandson of Ford company, Amrish Prabhu, who is a great devotee of Srila Prabhupada, who is doing great service in Mayapur. You don't relate it to the devotee of Krishna. You just think it's a Ford car. And then car means which model, this model, that model, and you kind of get lost into material realm. But if you just think in terms of Krishna, so everything you relate with Krishna, then it becomes transcendental. Then it's very easy to remember Krishna. It's a question of consciousness and training. Must see everything as Krishna. Of course, we don't become impersonal, but everything related to Krishna. Then it becomes transcendental. And then you can automatically remember Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. We have two more questions. One question from from YouTube, where the live stream is going on. So before that, there is Murlidhar Prabhu. This is a question from him. Earlier it was from his wife Anasuya Mataji. So please accept our humble obeisances to you, Maharaj. What's the natural character of our soul? Why it's always listening to mind?
Srila Prabhupada says very clearly, the natural constitutional position of the soul is Jivere Sarvahoy Nitya Krishna Das, that eternally you are servant of Krishna. And if you are eternally servant of Krishna, then what does that mean? That you are servant of Krishna, and Krishna is your master. And in an ordinary world also, if you have a master, then you think of your master. You don't think about anybody else. Then you think about pleasing your master. And if the master is pleased, then he will shower all kinds of benefits onto you. So that is the natural position of the soul, is to be Jivere Sarupa Hoy Nitya Krishna, eternally servant of Krishna. On the other hand, why we listen to the mind is because, as Prabhupada says, from time immemorial, the soul has become in contact with material energy. As I explained earlier on, the white light, you put in front of blue, green, red glass, it will take up the color of the glass in front of it. So the soul has been associating with the material energy, and therefore it takes up material, it acts materially. At the same time, Prabhupada says, and Bhagavad Gita Krishna also explains, the soul has got three servants who accompany him: the mind, the intelligence, and the ego. And by these three, you function as a soul. Now, as a pure soul, you use your mind, intelligence, and ego to serve Krishna. On the other hand, if you're influenced by material energy, then you act materially, then the mind, intelligence, and ego acts on material platform. Now, since the mind has become overwhelmed by the influence of material energy, then it begins to think, I am the master. And the soul becomes very weakened by the material energy. So I'll give one example, which is kind of, you can understand the analogy, is Superman. When Superman is in his superpower, he can do anything. But when he comes near kryptonite, this kind of fictitious chemical, then he loses his power. So similarly, the soul, when he's with Krishna, it is very powerful. When it becomes the kryptonite of the world, means material energy, it becomes weak. And when it becomes weakened, then the mind begins to think, hey, I'm the boss here. And then you become subservient to the mind. And the mind takes you everywhere. Therefore, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is advising Arjuna, control your mind. This obstinate mind is troublesome. You control it. And of course, then Krishna later explains If you absorb your mind in me, then you will be controlled. So therefore, the mind becomes very powerful. So we have to become stronger in spiritual environment. Therefore, then the mind becomes weaker. And when mind becomes weaker, then it's subservient to you. And therefore, you order the mind. Hey, I tell you what to do. You don't tell me what to do. And another example I give is like, you have a pet dog. You say, I'm taking the dog for a walk. So you put the dog on a leash, and then the dog is pulling you in all different directions. So who is taking who for a walk? The dog is taking you for a walk. The dog is the master. But if you have a very trained, disciplined dog, then you tell the dog, heel. And then you take one step forward, the dog will take one step forward. And it will not move anywhere without the order of the master. So the mind has to be controlled, as Krishna says to Arjuna, control this obstinate mind. And the mind, when it's controlled, then you tell the mind what to do. So it's very easy to control the mind. You have to fix the mind. Or rather, you have to fix yourself in Krishna. And when you become fixed in Krishna, in the spiritual environment, then you become very strong, you regain your energy. And when you become very strong, then mind becomes subservient, and then you control the mind and tell the mind, you follow my dictates, I don't follow your dictates. And therefore, you'll be very happy and the mind is controlled.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you. The examples were really wonderful. The Superman and the, what did you say? Crypto? What is that?
Kryptonite.
Kryptonite. Kryptonite.
This is my memory from my childhood. I used to watch Superman movies.
Very
But
nice.
it's useful sometimes for Krishna consciousness to give examples.
No. Very nice.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, one thing Prabhuji, connected to this, Maharajji, you told that ego, intelligent, another, what is that, sir? Three things is connected the soul.
Mind,
Okay.
intelligence, and ego.
Okay. Thank you.
Maharaj, we have two more questions. Before we go on to the questions, there are devotees who have joined us on YouTube seeking your blessings. I just want to take their names so that you can bless them. Pavan Rana Prabhu, Hare Krishna Maharaj, Danvat Pranam. Please accept my respectful obeisances at your lotus feet. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Sashi Nair from UAE. Amrita Bijayani, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. Sumit Sharma, Hare Krishna Guruji, Radhe Radhe from Bahrain. And he's got a question which I will ask. And Paresh Prabhu, you had a program in his house in Oman. Hare Krishna Guruji. Then Surabhi Mataji, Bharati Mataji, Bhaswant Naik Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances at your lotus feet, Maharaj. Sheila Gunashila Mataji from Hyderabad, Hare Krishna Maharaj. And then my wife has also written thanking you for very practical and relatable examples that you have given. So these are some of the,
So all those people on Zoom and YouTube,
yes.
I cannot give blessings because I have no blessings to give, but I have my best wishes for all of you. And I'll pray to my spiritual master and Srila Prabhupada that they kindly bestow their blessings upon you because they have the powers of blessing. I am only a small instrument in their hand. But my best wishes to all of you and my prayer to my Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada that please kindly shower all your blessings on all these wonderful devotees, that they become very fixed in their endeavor to become Krishna conscious and become successful.
Thank you so very much, Maharaj. So the next two questions, one is from Sumit Bahrain and the other is from Sarvaloka Prabhu, my very dear god brother from Chennai. So first we'll take Sumit Prabhu because he posted it on YouTube. His question is, Gurudev Pranam, how do we practice maintaining a calm being in a very high sales profession where aggression is a prerequisite and one has to be ruthless? Is that acceptable as I am aggressive at work? Then he continues, I will add aggressive and ruthless, but doesn't mean staying away from morality under any circumstance. So that's the situation he is in. He's seeking whether it's acceptable in that kind of a
You
environment.
see, it depends on one's occupation. And according to your occupation, you have to have certain qualities in order to do justice to your occupation. As a salesman, you may have to use some very aggressive techniques to sell your products or market your products. So there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you do not violate the norm of decency and you do not use deceitfulness. Then you will be, doing your justice to your occupation. Just like Arjuna is very, very peaceful. But at the same time, Krishna is invoking anger in him. Because if you are not angry, you cannot go with a very, very sort of relaxed disposition and go on to the battlefield and start firing arrows and start killing people. You really have to have anger to exercise. Same with Hanuman. Hanuman is in a very, very peaceful disposition. But when it came to the point of protecting Mother Sita, then he became very, very angry and he burned down Lanka. But after burning Lanka, he became very peaceful again. So sometimes it depends on your occupation, whether whatever occupation is, it doesn't really matter. It is to do justice to your occupation. Because if you are like a mild-mannered person, you say you go as a salesperson or marketing person, you go, please, Hare Krishna, I want to sell this to you. Please buy this. They may not buy it. You have to use some what they call sales training or sales marketing to use these abilities you have for selling your product. So aggression is required, but as long as that aggression is not violent or, as I said, deceitful, then you promote your product with all honesty. Then people will see your honesty and say, yes, you are actually a very honest person. You say that these are the qualities of my product, but these are downsides of my product also. Then they will see that you are honest and you're not trying to sell them something by deceitfulness. Because you can say that you can compare other products in the market and they also have similar, but our product is superior because we have this and that, which is superior to other products. And you're honest, then sometimes see honesty pays. So you have to try your best. I don't see that kind of aggression for marketing is wrong, but as long as you're not deceitful, as long as you're honest, then that's the way you should go forward in your chosen profession.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. Next question from Sarvaloka Prabhu. Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances to your lotus feet. Could you please explain Anartha Nivritti?
Anartha Nivritti, according to the verse, Adosada Tatha Sadhu Sangha Tatha Bhajana Kriya Tatha Anartha Nivritti. Anartha Nivritti means that all the anarthas are taken out. So Prabhupada gives this example, just like an expert gardener, when he has got a very nice manicured garden with beautiful flower plants, and it is very, very pleasing to the eyes with all the colorful flowers and different leaves, and in there there are some weeds. So the expert gardener will go and pick out the weeds, because if he leaves the weeds growing along with the other flowers, and sometimes the weeds have this natural ability to overwhelm the other plants and take over, and then it becomes very, very unsightly. So he picks out the anarthas. So similarly, Prabhupada explains that by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we become expert gardeners, and we pick out all these unwanted anarthas, all these weeds in our heart, which are kind of overwhelming the devotional creeper. So as Prabhupada explains, that the seed of devotion is already there in your heart. And by the mercy of the Supreme Lord and his pure devotee, the right condition is created for that seed of devotion, Bhakti Lata Bij, to sprout out and start growing. So when your Bhakti Lata Bij is growing in your heart, along with many anarthas, many material desires, then it overwhelms the devotional creeper and it stifles the growth of devotional creeper. And therefore, the anartha nivriti is that you pluck it out. In other words, you give up all the material desires and replenish them with spiritual desires. As Prabhupada says, that you will never be desireless. You'll always be desireful. The only thing is what kind of desires you have, whether you have material desires or you have spiritual desires. So you take out material desires, which is anartha nivriti, all the bad things in the heart, all the deceitfulness and all the kind of disease condition of the heart of being, envy, greedy, lusty, all these things out of your heart and replace them with good things. Then your creeper is nourished and devotional grows. And that is my understanding of anartha nivriti, that we pluck out all the unwanted desires from the heart, because the root cause of our suffering is that all these desires are so deep rooted in the heart, in other words, deep rooted to the soul, and therefore they overwhelm you, and then they take you all over the place and try to fulfill these desires. And when you are trying to fulfill these desires, it becomes a very difficult task sometimes. You become very frustrated, you become very angry, and anger and frustration leads to illusion and delusion, and then you are completely off track. So therefore, the very process of bhajana kriya is by chanting the holy name of the Lord, associating with sadhus, studying the scriptures, as Prabhupada mentioned here, that you take away all these unwanted desires from the heart and replenish them with spiritual desires. And that will nourish your devotional creeper and it will grow. And that is my understanding of anartha nivriti, removing of unwanted desires from the heart.
Maharaj, next is a question. If one may have knowingly committed an offense like breaking of some regulative principle for sense enjoyment, what should one do to rectify and continue to progress in spiritual life?
Well, first and foremost, if one of the regulative principles is broken, it is not end of all. One must not give up the practice of Krishna consciousness, no matter how difficult we have, because sometimes, as Prabhupada said, when we are in the battlefield and we are fighting a battle with Maya, there will be casualties, there will be some injuries, and overwhelming powers which will drag us into the dark region. But as soon as you become aware of it and realize, then you atone for it. And your atonement is that you guard against those kind of pitfalls or fall downs or breaking those regulatory principles and become more conscious and aware of it. Then Krishna will oversee that. But it's just like a child, it sees others walking around him and he wants to walk, so he tries to get up. Every time he tries to get up, because the balance is not there yet, he keeps falling down. But he doesn't say, well, this is bad news, I keep falling down, so I don't want to get up again. I'll just stay in my fallen condition. No, he tries again and again, try harder and try harder. And as we become more and more fixed in our devotional practices, then this desire for overwhelming breaking regular principles will be very much less. In my estimation, you see, no meat, fish or eggs, generally we don't break this because, if you are a very careful person, okay. Then the other one is no intoxication. So that's very easy to follow. The only two which are most difficult to follow is one, having illicit sex affair, and two, gambling. So gambling, although it seems very easy to follow, but Prabhupada's explanation of gambling is that if you waste your time uselessly in frivolous activities, that is gambling. So we should try to avoid frivolous activities. And whatever time we have, either we engage in reading, chanting, serving, or remembering Krishna in different ways, then you are not wasting your time. Every moment is very precious, is used in Krishna consciousness. But if you use time for frivolous activities, that is gambling, Prabhupada says. Not that you go down to the gambling office and put a bet on a horse or a soccer match or some sports that I will put $10 and I will get $100 in return if I win, or this kind of these are gross gambling. But subtle gambling is frivolous activities. So you have to be careful. So sometimes, as I said, that we may become a victim to these things, and then we atone for it and realize our wrongful doing, and we correct the course of procedure. So suppose you are driving down the road and you make a left turn instead of going right, then you realize, oh my God, I've made a wrong turn, I will go in a different direction. So you quickly recorrect your course and you go again and go back on course. And then when you're on course, then you're on your right course, then you are reaching your destination without difficulty. So sometimes it is that we may go off course, then we correct the course and come on the right course. Just like one example I gave today this morning to one devotee. There was one sannyasi in Australia. He had fallen down and his god brothers and sisters were treating him very badly. And Prabhupada became very upset. He said, why you are treating him badly? Okay, he has fallen down. It is not end of all, but still engage in devotional service, engage in associating with Vaishnavas and do service for the pleasure of Krishna in the spirit of devotion. And then you will again rise up. Even Krishna says, even if someone falls down, if he corrects himself from even an abominable act, he is still considered saintly. So who are we to judge anyone or consider or condemn ourselves for our own misgivings if Krishna doesn't see that way? Krishna says, okay, you have made a mistake, correct your course, and very quickly you will become saintly again. And this is what Krishna is saying. So we have to take shelter of Krishna. And as I said, that we cannot become serial offenders and breaking rules, regulations. Once in a while, we become victim of overwhelming energies of Maya. But as soon as we realize that, oh, I've done wrong, correct your course. And as soon as you correct your course, you go forward in the right course, you reach your destination without fail. So there's no need to become despondent about this. Just become positive and correct your course and go forward.
Maharaj, so we will take one more question. We have from the YouTube by Pawan Rana Prabhu from Muscat. Gurudev Pranam, how can we adopt the method of Dhamma, self-control, as it is utmost required for Krishna consciousness? Can you please elaborate more on this subject?
Well, see, self-control is that we have to learn that whatever actions we perform, are they going to be harmful or are they going to be productive? That is one. So obviously, if you are thoughtful, then you will always be conscious that my every action, my every word will have some kind of consequences, whether good or bad. So if you are in a position where we all have the power of discrimination between right and wrong, then we should be always thoughtful that before making any action or saying anything, just think, is this going to be a positive consequence or negative consequence? If it's positive, then go ahead and do it wonderfully. Negative, then refrain from it. On the other hand, a practical example I give you, that it is Ekadashi, and you are fasting from grains, and some person comes there and says, Prabhu, I have got this delicious pizza for you. This is the best pizza you can ever taste in your life. What happens at that time? You see the pizza, you get the fragrance, and you are a pizzarian. You are devoted to pizza, basically. Your life revolves around pizza, for example, say. But intelligence and higher thoughts and consciousness says, no, today is Ekadasi. Prabhu, thank you very much. Not today. So you are self-controlled. So this is a very practical example. So similarly, in every action, you have to think what consequence will be the outcome of this. Then if you are conscious, then you know that there's good consequence and there's bad consequence. So if there is bad, then just refrain from it. Even though it may be overwhelming, refrain from it. Then you will overcome it. It's just like Prabhupada gives the example that you have a boil and the boil seems very itchy. But if you refrain from scratching, then very quickly, you take proper precautions, antiseptic, everything, the boil will heal and you'll be free from this suffering. But the urge for scratching, because the itching is there and it's unbearable, then what happens? You start scratching and that boil becomes open in wound and becomes even more infectious and then becomes even more painful. So refrain. So these are some examples I can give you which comes to my mind right now of how to become Dharma, self-control, refrain, thoughtful, good consequence, bad consequence. Good consequence, go ahead and do it. Bad consequence, refrain. And that way, we will constantly be always thinking, right or wrong, right or wrong. And you always do right things, then you will never have any problems in life.
Thank you, Maharaj. So the questions are over. And so quickly, I want to read a few comments that devotees have written, particularly after today's session. So these are appreciations. Maharaj, Sunaja Mataji from Sharjah writes, Dandavat Pranam, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Atmanivedana Swami Maharaj ki jai. Amazing class with classic examples. And Achra Mehta Mataji writes from Muscat, thanks for such a wonderful explanation as usual. And Sunaja Mataji that writes, and she has recapped your today's lesson, the key takeaway lesson. She writes, mind plus Krishna is equal to powerful. Mind plus material illusion is equal to powerlessness. So that's a takeaway today from your wonderful class, Maharaj. And Prema Manjari Devidasi and Rajamani Prabhu from Zurich. Thank you so very much, Guru Maharaj. Wonderful answer. Your servant, Prema Manjari and Rajamani Das. And then we have Sumit Prabhu, who asked you a question about the aggressiveness in sales. He sends, thank you, Gurudev, Haribol, please accept my humble obeisances. Sashi Nair from Dubai writes, thank you, Maharaj, such a wonderful answers with good examples. And Pavan Rana Prabhu, the last question that you just answered, he writes, thank you, Maharaj, for wonderful answer. I am overwhelmed. So on that high note of being overwhelmed with your association, the satsang that we have had with you, Maharaj, we would end this session now and look forward to having another session with you next week. Though you did indicate that there is a possibility that we could have the session with you during the weekdays, but obviously that's working days now for everyone. So we'll see if we can have one in between in the morning where, if that's a possibility, like our 7 o'clock in the morning and yours would be 11ish at your end. So we'll work that out. Otherwise, next weekend, Maharaj, we will meet again.
No problem. So you will figure out, but the weekday session, because it's working day, I'm sure people have to be in anxiety to go to work.
Right.
You can have a super session, half an hour.
Right.
Quick antidote of Bhagavatam.
Right.
Because right now I'm looking at my clock on here, and we have almost done just under 2 hours.
That's right. Correct.
So I don't think, when you're working day, you can afford 2 hours.
I was thinking if there is a possibility we could do a half an hour Bhagavatam, very just half an hour. We will just do it very, we'll keep the time. We'll see if it is like early, a little early in the morning, at least one session during the week, minimum, I'm saying. So we'll work it out. We'll check with the devotees, and if they're all ready, whosoever wishes to come on board. So we'll do that, Maharaj. So you can unmute yourself, and if you all want to say Hare Krishna to Maharaj, then we will end the session in the next few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. So please feel free to unmute and.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Dhanyavad,
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj.
Krishna Maharaj.
Thank you,
Hare
Maharaj.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.